The big story, Bitcoin ETFs. Got big news from BlackRock, but it's not just BlackRock anymore. We're seeing, of course, all these other organizations coming in, all these other organizations that are interested in a Bitcoin ETF, but we're also seeing other countries hop on the bandwagon. BlackRock gave the green light and other countries are going. Also, some really big Bitcoin charts and just some big news that's really going to affect the cryptocurrency markets. So let's dive in first here and talk about BlackRock. So BlackRock CEO has said that crypto is going to transcend international currencies due to global demand. It's such an odd thing. It's even a bit awkward for me to look at Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, knowing who he is, what he does, what BlackRock stands for, and then hearing him shilling Bitcoin. I don't know what to think about it, but it's going to get our bags pumped up anyway, so I'll take it. But he's absolutely right. Crypto is going to transcend international currencies. The use case, the value proposition for cryptocurrencies is already being understood by people all around the world. And if you live in a Western country where everything kind of works pretty well, you might not even be that excited about Bitcoin in terms of its like censorship resistance and stuff. Oh, the scarcity and the number go up and the store value and all that stuff. Sure. But if you live in a lot of places in the world, sending remittances, pain in the butt, very expensive. If you live in some countries such as Russia or Iran or a few others, just a regular person, right? I'm not talking about the politicians or any of those kind of people, just like a regular dude living your life. Lebanon putting crazy capital restrictions on people, right? And they're not even like a global pariah country. If you're just a regular person living in one of these countries, you have been cut out of the financial system, whether by your own banks or by international banking systems. Bitcoin is a lifeline for these people. It is already transcending international currencies, and it's only getting bigger all the time. So again, I agree, Larry, but I don't like agreeing with you. Jeez. Over in Australia, shout out to the Aussies across the ditch there. First spot Bitcoin ETF application filed under new Australian regulations. So Australia is finally going to be getting its Bitcoin ETF, it seems. Pretty exciting news. Australia, of course, is a big global capital market, about as big as Canada. So we're talking, 1.5%, 2% of global equity markets in Australia. Not as big as US markets, of course, which is 52 to 54% of global equity markets. So a US Bitcoin ETF approval is going to be a much bigger deal, of course, than a Australian Bitcoin ETF, but I welcome it. I welcome it. Every Bitcoin ETF that comes out, I mean, you have to think about it. There's not even enough Bitcoin for every Australian to have one Bitcoin, and not that many people in Australia comparatively, right? Not enough Bitcoin for every Canadian to have a Bitcoin, and so on and so forth. Let's look at Brazil. Brazil's got a Bitcoin ETF, not even close to enough Bitcoin for every Brazilian to have a Bitcoin. Not that everybody can afford a Bitcoin in any of these countries, mind you. And what about Europe? Europe, of course, just launched their Bitcoin ETF as well, right? We talked about this the other day. Was like 600 million people or something in the European Union. Like, come on, you got all these Bitcoin ETFs launching. There's only 21 million max Bitcoin ever. Realistically, probably 3 to 5 million of those Bitcoin have been lost permanently by early adopters. Satoshi took 1 million under the waves with him wherever he went. So we're really only talking about what, 15, 16 million Bitcoin total, right? A lot of it's already in the hands of long-term holders. 70% of it hasn't moved on chain in over a year. Exchange balances just keep falling, all this kind of stuff. Like all these Bitcoin ETFs, there is simply not enough Bitcoin, not even close to enough Bitcoin to fulfill the demand for all of these Bitcoin ETFs that are coming out. And of course, Europe's great, and Canada's great, and Brazil's great. I'm happy Australians are finally getting on board, but the US, that's the big market. That's the one we all want to see the Bitcoin ETF approvals happening, because that's where it's really going to take off big time. Meanwhile, the dollar has last week plunged pretty precipitously. In fact, Standard Bank is calling for right now multi-year downtrend for the dollar. Think about that, right? We've had this massive uptrend basically since late 2020. We've had this big uptrend for the dollar, and it really took off in late 2021. 2022 was like the year of the dollar. And ever since then, it's just been going down and down and down and down and down as people are getting out of dollars, looking for more risk assets. And of course, there's all kinds of other situations that are weighing heavily on the dollar. And as we know, when the dollar index plunges, it tends to be a good time for Bitcoin. And that's exactly what's happening. So if we have a multi-year downtrend for the dollar, if Standard Bank is right, then that can mean a multi-year uptrend for Bitcoin. And of course, nothing goes up in a straight line, obviously, but it is pretty interesting nevertheless. Big news as well coming out of Binance, which has been under a lot of fire recently as they're laying off staff and all kinds of other stuff going on. But one good bit of news out of Binance recently is that they have officially integrated Bitcoin Lightning Network. Now, Binance is one of the biggest exchanges in the world. So them integrating the Bitcoin Lightning Network is a massive, massive step for global Bitcoin adoption, because it means that more regular people in countries all over the world can now buy and then withdraw Bitcoin for basically nothing. And they can get it to their Lightning wallets, and then they can spend it for basically nothing, right? Talking on-chain fees here, right? Because if you're a regular person trying to buy, some groceries down at the local market, you live in El Salvador and you want to go down the street and buy $10 worth of groceries, if you pay $5 in on-chain fees to do that, you're not going to do it. But if it's only 1 cent or 2 cents to do that on-chain or I guess not on-chain in this situation, layer 2 transaction, right? Settled on-chain later, layer 2 at the start. That becomes a bigger value proposition here. So that's pretty gosh darn cool, if you ask me. Now I want to share a chart with you. I made this the other day because right now Bitcoin's at a very, very, very key level. The current resistance zone where we at right now for Bitcoin, around $30,000 to $31,500. This is a key area. We can go all the way back to late 2020, early 2021, when we actually saw this big breakout. We saw the price get up to like, what was it, $42,000, $43,000. Then we saw a big correction. That correction zone was the retest, right? The retest of that major, major breakout. That was the first area where we saw this price point around $30,000, $31,000 become very important. Fast forward to mid-2021, June, July 2021, we see again that $30,000 area becoming very, very important. Oh yeah, sure, it got down like $28,000 or something in that summer of 2021. But that key area where we saw the candle closes, not the wicks, where the candle closes were happening, that was right around $30,000, $31,000. Now move up to around June 2022. We saw the markets collapse, and we saw that final rally, that sort of kiss of death touch, trying to cross back over that area of previous support, but now it was acting as resistance. And then, of course, markets collapsed after that. Over in April 2023, 0.4 on this chart here, we see a failed attempt to break over that resistance. And right now, we've been consolidating under this resistance for a month. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting point to be at here for the markets. Now, before we get into the rest of the charts, if you are a trader, you got yourself an account over on BYBIT. It is the best place for trading crypto. Great futures markets, super hot spot altcoin markets, very popular copy trading service. And if you use the link down below in the description to start your account, you're going to get exclusive fee discounts as well as exclusive deposit and trading bonuses up to $30,000. So go ahead and check it out if you are a trader. Now let's take a look at this chart here from Glassnode. So this is the Bitcoin Bollinger Band range. Glassnode says the digital asset market continues to see remarkably little volatility, with the classic 20-day Bollinger Bands experiencing an extreme squeeze. Not just a regular squeeze, guys, an extreme squeeze. It's the good one, right? Price range of just 4.2% separates the upper and lower Bollinger Bands, making this the quietest Bitcoin market since the lull in early January, which is crazy, man, which is crazy. I mean, think about this. BlackRock, Fidelity, all these guys are trying to get a Bitcoin ETF. Australia's doing it. Europe's doing it. We see all this institutional interest, generally a risk-on attitude coming back into markets, et cetera, et cetera. And we're as boring as January. Crazy. Now, one thing to note is that when we see this kind of tightness in the Bollinger Bands, it means that strap in, because volatility is coming soon. Now, that doesn't always mean upside volatility. In this market, I would have a bias towards upside volatility, but it doesn't guarantee upside volatility. It simply is indicating volatility is coming. So strap on your seatbelt and get ready here, right? So interesting to see how we break up. But again, the bias in a bullish period, as we have been in, would be to see this breaking to the upside assuming, of course, there's no sort of negative news events that spook the market. But I feel like we've had everything thrown at us, man. We have exchange, regulatory FUD, everything. The U.S. government selling Bitcoin, all this stuff. Bitcoin hasn't really broken down that bad in any of this stuff. So it's pretty interesting to see the strength that Bitcoin's been showing despite all of the bad news, because there's not a lot of panic sellers left. I mean, 70%, again, of the Bitcoin on chain has not moved in over a year. It means most people are just chilling. They're holding. They're not ready to sell their Bitcoin at these kind of prices. And of course, on exchanges, the balances just keep going down. Now, this is absolute insanity here, because Bitcoin balances on exchange just reached a 5-year low. We are in a new era of Bitcoin, right? Ever since 2020, we have been on a non-stop move down. So there's 2.25 million Bitcoin currently sitting on exchanges. Now, contrast that with the 3.2 million Bitcoin that were on exchanges in March 2020. So in 3 years, we've seen 1 million Bitcoin taken off exchanges. And we've seen a massive acceleration of about 400,000 Bitcoin being accumulated over the past 6 months. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting to see this amount of Bitcoin continue to be taken off of exchanges. Fascinating stuff, isn't it? In spite of the current market conditions, people are mass stacking Bitcoin, and they haven't stopped. The pressure has been maintained right throughout this bearish cycle in the market. So I'm pretty impressed. Good stacking, everybody. Good stacking. Keep it up. I keep stacking weekly. Do you guys stack weekly? Let me know in the comment section if you have been stacking Bitcoin or not, right? I've been stacking Bitcoin basically every single week for, I don't know, a long time now. Thinking the bigger picture, the rational root here, sharing a chart that shows global liquidity got a decent lift over the past few months. And of course, this is something we've talked about a few times here. Better move myself over the other side of the chart here. This is something that we've seen a few times where we discuss this, and the money is coming in. And it's not every government that's doing this, right? The global liquidity has definitely been led by China. To a lesser extent, we've seen Japan coming in here as well, bringing in their liquidity. But one of the big things everyone's been watching for is when the Fed really starts printing money again. And there's so many things that we really need to pay attention to in that regard, because look, the Fed is going to start printing money again. The interest on the debt, I think it's like $650 million. No, not million's a little number, $650 billion in the US. It's just the interest on the debt. So far this year, it's going to be projected to be $1 trillion by the end of the year. So $1 trillion in interest, not paying down the principal on the US's almost $33 trillion in debt, just talking about the interest here, just the interest. It's absurd. There's no way the US pays this. They don't have that kind of tax revenue coming in. Expenditures have gone up, tax revenues down, and the interest just keeps going up. So that means the only thing the US is going to be able to do is going to be able to print more money to pay their bills. The money printers will be turned back on. I guarantee it. It's only a question of when and to what intensity they turn them back on, and what is the excuse that they use when they turn them back on. It will come. It always does. It always does. Ryan Selka shared this chart that's been going around here. This is Bitcoin and traditional assets, ROI versus USD. So this is looking at Bitcoin versus gold versus the S&P 500. So what have the returns been over the years if you had invested in any of those 14 years ago? Now, it's a tricky one with Bitcoin, because you're not going to go back and buy Bitcoin for 5 cents anymore, right? But overall, the numbers here are pretty shocking, right? Holding Bitcoin has been absolutely massive. And if we were to come up closer to now, right, and look back 5 years or 6 years or 7 years, and anyone who bought Bitcoin, again, you massively outperformed gold. You massively outperformed the S&P 500. Okay, if you bought Bitcoin in, 2021 November, well, then, yeah, you probably are not making money on Bitcoin right now. But if you've been dollar cost averaging in, you would actually be up currently. I know it sounds crazy, but you would be. You would currently be up. So there you go. there you go. Bitcoin continues to be an outperforming asset. Not saying the other stuff isn't okay too, but just that Bitcoin keeps kicking butt, basically. Over in Indonesia, they're going to be launching a cryptocurrency exchange in July. This is a national exchange, so this could bring up, Indonesia's a big country, 250 million people in Indonesia, and they do like crypto. They do like crypto in Indonesia, so this could actually see a big amount of money coming into the market, as well as Indonesians start FOMOing into the top coins. This is potentially a big story almost no one's talking about. And yet Indonesia is a massive market. Indonesia is a market where people love crypto, right? And Indonesia's been pretty clear on saying you can't spend crypto in the country, but you can invest in crypto, and they want everybody to do it through their government exchange, which I'm not super excited about a government exchange, but I am excited about the potential for Indonesia to come in and pump up all of our coins. So that's cool too. This story I thought was super fascinating. So this is out of Hong Kong. Physical stores in Hong Kong are selling digital assets. It's an interesting thing, right? And they have actually seen this year mainland Chinese customers go from being under 5% of their customer base to nearly 50% of their customer base, no matter the jurisdiction. The desire for Bitcoin is global. So what's been very fascinating is that, see, in China, you can't really get Bitcoin. There's some black market places, from what I've heard, right? But what's interesting is you basically have people crossing from mainland China with suitcases full of cash, basically, coming and buying Bitcoin at little stores that sell Bitcoin, actual like brick and mortar retail shops where people can walk in and buy Bitcoin using cash. And it's been taken off. And especially with China getting more friendly towards Bitcoin because of the whole Hong Kong thing, which again had the approval of Beijing. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. It just shows again that desire for mainland Chinese money to get access to Bitcoin. Are you starting to see the potential yet for what we could see, what kind of markets we could see after the Bitcoin halving, how fast things can move, right? If we see, for example, something like happened in 2020, remember, markets can move very fast. We had the Bitcoin halving, we had 4 or 5 months of kind of nothing really happening, and then boom, absolute explosion. Could happen again next time. I like this thought here from British Hodl. If you're a single digit millionaire, the next cycle, I believe, you'll be priced out of owning a whole Bitcoin. Someone worth $4 million will find it hard to liquidate it at $300,000 or $500,000 to buy one Bitcoin. And if we do get such a wildly high price, then that'll only be for a minute on some exchange somewhere. So, even at the bottom of the next bear market, Bitcoin's going to be what? $50,000, $60,000. Even if you are a single digit millionaire, hey, even 5 or 6% of your net worth into one coin, that requires some consideration. And think about the cycle after that. It's going to be even less likely.